So, Jeff, you said you just came back from a networking event. I came back from a very large and very long networking event, but you did this morning. So, what was that about?
Well, mine had a 20-minute commute, slightly shorter than yours. But I'm part of an organization called Trouble Victor. So it is a organization for veterans in some stage of transitioning from military service to business and entrepreneurial life post retirement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we get together the first Friday of every month at 7:30. Starbucks actually sponsors the
Oh,
program,
wow.
and
Okay.
they provide us dedicated space. And today we had a expert on the art of networking come in
Ah,
to a networking event
there.
and give his very interesting perspective on the answer to the question. I'm a small business owner and I can't get people to listen to me, or I'm open to work, looking for work, but I never seem to get a job interview. And it was quite interesting to listen to somebody in a real world. He owns a recruitment agency and he works with a number of companies in very specific sets of fields that he has a bit of expertise in. And as he jokingly says, I charge them a lot more money to do a little bit of work and find them great people. But it's like any value, right?
Mhm.
You're when you try to, it's not cost per minute.
No.
It's the value the individual brings to the table for their
Yeah.
skills, knowledge, and experience is worth the price point, not in the short amount of work they provide for you
Yeah. Yeah.
to achieve it. But no, it's a fantastic network event. We get together, like I said, once or twice a month in these group, and we're all at some stage of retirement, some stage of entrepreneurial or business life. And for a lot of us, it's, you're in your late 40s, early 50s, and now you're starting your second career. That can be a bit daunting, shall we say, in today's labor market.
Yes, I fully understand that. Yes. Having done it, my kids used to joke, when I used to say, "Well, I'm in my second or third midlife crisis," and they would say, "How could you have more than one?" I said, "Because you don't know when the real midlife is. You just keep
No, exactly. Like, is this
going."
it? Is this my last career? Like, I
Yes,
don't
yeah.
know.
I don't know. I don't know. I remember, interestingly enough, I'm the master of mistiming when it comes to doing things for myself. Just like totally. I opted out of an academic career in 1982. And there were several things that I did that were both right and wrong. One of the things I did that was absolutely right, I became a Canadian. So it was the thing I needed to do to say, I am now planting the seed and the roots and everything
Yeah.
else. I ain't going nowhere else. That's it. I'm here to stay. 1982 was actually, if people recall, the first major global recession.
Yep.
Everybody was out of work. And so what
Yep.
do I decide to do? Oh, let's go look for a job, a
Yep.
real job, not
Perfect timing.
perfect timing. And I went, really? So it was a fascinating, interesting experience that I probably should be writing books about. Uh, and I don't mean academic books. I mean,
Oh,
trashy novels.
yes,
It
yes. The
was, it
world needs
was,
more trashy novels.
it
There
was
are
just
way too many academic articles and
Oh
books
no,
out
no,
there.
no, academic articles. I just read one on motivation and addiction. I thought, okay, I don't need this. This is great, fantastic. Why did I read that? Don't ask. It's just one of those things that when Victor sees something and says, "Oh, the word motivation. Let's see if I could read through these 25 pages of dense science analysis," and it was
Yeah, yeah.
metabiological, but that's beside the point. What I did, I transitioned out and I ended up in a rooming house in downtown Toronto. Now that's a story in itself. The characters alone
Ah,
merited a
yeah,
sitcom, really, totally.
yeah.
They were not intentionally funny, but for me, they lifted the spirit, because I was in the midst of saying, why did I just do what I did? This is insane. Beyond all that, after 600 letters going out looking for jobs, I finally landed a job in a place that I absolutely hated, but I needed the money. I was down to the last, whatever was in the bank. And I had to get out of the rooming house after a while. And several things seem to be I'll call it the luck factor that happens to us despite all the plans. And this is the part where, we have to be optimists, whatever, how dire the situation is. But we also have to be lucky. And I'm going to go back to talk about what it means to be lucky. At the same time that I finally got a job that paid miserable salary, but was more than what I had in the bank, therefore had to take it,
Yeah.
in a field that I had no background in, television. Really, I also had applied to get into co-op housing, Riverdale Riverdale co-op housing here in Toronto. And they had just opened up a facility of brand new townhouses that were stacked townhouses. So they had apartments upstairs, apartments downstairs. And I was admitted into this. I seem to have passed the interviews without being totally desperate about it. And so I got into one of my favorite apartments. It was one of those saving things. I got a job. I got an apartment. I was able to get furniture.
Yeah.
I was able to move in. It turned out to be my favorite apartment. I was in it for 10 years. I went from what the initial job to a much better job within 2 years, and all these things worked out. Was it planned? This is where we tend to lose perspective when we think that we have to plan out everything. Oh, young person, plan your career going forward. Got this education, that education. And I look at them and I say, okay, try a little bit of luck. What is luck? One of my favorite people that I met very early on when I was starting into business and really at a significant job, he said he defined luck this way: everybody receives opportunity. Those who are lucky seize opportunity, not just see it, but actually grab it. Those who are unlucky, they can see the opportunity, but they're either afraid or too busy doing something else or ignore it, and they are the unlucky ones. Luck is not about being successful. Luck is about taking the risk.
And preparation.
Well, yeah, you don't just take a risk because, I will never dive into the deep end of a pool because I really barely know how to swim. So come on, folks, I'm not silly.
But
I would never do canoeing like you in northern Saskatchewan, period. That's it. There are limits to my craziness.
But the preparation I speak to is circle back to what the gentleman was talking about this morning is, for example, he said he when he started building a business, he went to 150 networking events a year, sometimes 3 a week, 3 a day. And he said, when I would go to one, he said he would prepare for who's going to be there. The market, for example. So if he was he just recently went to one in this poshy Rideau club here in Ottawa, and it was and
I've been in it, so don't
everything you think it is. Exactly, right? But it was about alternative investments in mining.
Oh.
Not his area of specialties, but a networking opportunity.
Yeah.
So he spent a little bit of time reading high-level latest news and events in alternative marketing, alternative investment in Canada. So he knew that when he ran into the person that wanted to talk about mineral rights under farms in Quebec, he could have a short, high-level conversation about that. So
Mm,
he knew that he was okay to strike up a conversation with whatever, just advice like be the first one there. Try to get a picture of the list of people who are showing. Pick
mm-hmm,
your targets beforehand. He said, I stand by the bar or I stand by the water cooler.
mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to connect with those points
Yep,
throughout the night.
yep,
He just gave a whole bunch of points, and it's the idea of I've always gone on the mantra that luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity,
yeah,
right? So opportunities come. I have no control over them. They
right,
show up. Here I
right,
am. But am I prepared and ready to seize, like you say,
precisely,
when it shows up?
precisely,
Right. So when I
precisely.
go to a meeting of people in an industry I don't know about, but for whatever reason I want to connect with them, it makes sense for me to make look I at least reasonably belong there.
Yeah,
Right. It
yes,
it it would be like you
yes,
going to a foreign country
yes.
for the first time, but
Oh yeah,
not understanding anything about culture.
that's right.
And in the first 2 hours, you've stepped on almost every toe there is to step upon
Yes,
because you didn't prepare, which means your luck or opportunity is going to be a lot less
yes,
because you broke some pretty simply, easily Googleable
yes, yes,
culture
yes,
frames that
yes,
we don't understand
yes,
when you're in a
yeah,
different environment.
yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking again, my experience, my various experiences going into foreign countries, especially where I don't look like everybody else, so automatically I stand out. Um, Even on this trip to Jordan, at one point, I made reference to myself looking like Santa Claus, and everybody laughed, and they thought, "Yeah, okay." The other is, preparedness. We could prepare, we could over prepare, but I don't think there is such a thing as over preparing. It's okay. Where are you going? What are you doing? And then part of preparedness is, what are your constraints? What are the things you cannot accomplish? What are the things that you have to accept as a constraint to your ability? For example, in a foreign situation, which is more obvious than, say, going to a networking meeting here in Canada, it's language. Automatically, it's language. Now, you could bone up on language and try to become the Berlitz Babel expert in 2 weeks, and then fall over yourself for forever. Uh, but if you go in recognizing that you have a level of intelligence, you're not dumb, you are prepared to do certain things, hence prepared, but you also recognize your constraints, that you can't do everything and be
Yeah.
everything. Then you also wrap that around something called, what I call, and I constantly use this term, respect. My respect for the other is such that I will not impose myself on them, but I am also somewhat expert in certain areas where I can offer advice or direction, a level of intelligence, an outside opinion, and so all those things, which over 30 years or 40 years, you tend to make that part of who you are. You don't necessarily have to go and write a doctoral dissertation on another culture when you realize that there are similarities and there are massive differences. Just learn to work within both of those.
Yeah, and I use a phrase all the time that I am unapologetically me. And that
Yeah.
means that I don't change who I am based
Nope.
upon the environment I
Yep.
am in.
Yes.
Because often and not when people try to do that, it looks like they're trying to do that, right?
Yes.
If I'm going somewhere with a certain genre or group of people or culture, I'm still me, right? The difference, and I make this joke all the time, I try to say not political, but if you look at France's president when he travels,
Mm-hmm.
he wears a blue suit
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter the culture he's in. Doesn't matter
Mhm.
the place he's in. He
Mhm.
wears a blue suit because
Mhm.
it's conservative. He's representing his country. He doesn't dress up in
Mhm.
everybody else's attire. Like
Right.
he's there representing him. He
Yes.
is himself, very respectful of the culture you're in. You deal with yourself appropriately. And my experience has been that is a far more genuine way,
Yes.
and people see it that is
Yes.
genuine.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
if I go to Jordan, I'm not Jordanian. I
No.
like you would look just totally out of place. I'm a
Yes.
visitor,
Yes.
but I would respect the culture where I was, but I would be me. And people
Yes.
like this is not a show, this is not a veil. Um, this is actually me. And I found that to be far more beneficial when you're getting
Yes.
the opportunity to meet new people to say, here I am, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree. Yet, there's that level or that limit. I'll use the word limit about I being me in a foreign country. Having just come back from Jordan, a place that is very liberal and very wide open, and you know very few constraints in terms of how you can act, up to a point. Obviously, you're not going to
yeah,
go running around being a total lunatic. That'll get you arrested anywhere. So even here, but it's those people who are there to work who wear shorts, and I look at them going, folks, yes, it's hot. Yes, you want to be cool. Yes, but you're working with Jordanians, right? You're not working with your friends from Switzerland or from, colleagues from wherever. Um, there's a level of discomfort I have. It sounds like a judgment, and it maybe, and yes, it is. I mean, I'm not going to fool myself, but at the same time, I understand why people would do that. I just could never do that.
yep,
Um, you dress appropriately. You dress for the heat, because when it gets up to 47 degrees, you have to. I don't care who you are.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Yet at the same time, you do it in such a way that you're not exposing yourself as if you were, I don't know, the French Riviera, or whatever,
Yeah,
you
like
know?
we went to 2 days ago. I went to another networking event here in
Oh,
Ottawa.
yeah.
This was one hosted by City Council and the mayor for
Mhm.
the Veterans Transition Task Force. There were 200 of us at this one,
Oh, wow.
and it was business casual.
Yes. Yes.
Some impressions of that definition are
Yes.
likely probably outside. I'm trying to be politically correct here, of what you would wear in a public place. Like I do a lot of work from home. And I say to people, I actually enjoy these networking events because I'm in reasonably appropriate business attire
Yes.
in a business environment, interacting with other people who are out to gain something, build networks, they're chasing dreams, they're doing. That's a great place to be. To show up in your motorcycle jacket, to ride your Harley there,
Oh,
leave your motorcycle cut on, and come
oh,
in just because it has a big veterans on the back, and
oh.
you have a cowboy hat to cover your motorcycle helmet hair, and the mayor of the city of 1 million people is standing there speaking. The chief of police showed up in his dress uniform, um, and there you are.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
what message are you telling me?
Exactly.
Oh, I'm not going to say the message because you and I can read what I'm trying to say,
Oh,
but that.
yes.
And so now, if I'm somebody in that room who's looking to make connections, I'm looking for somebody to maybe meet and just out of the blue have a conversation with because they look interesting. That's not the person
No.
I'm going to interact.
No.
And culturally wise, it's about knowing your audience.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's about knowing the target that
Yes.
you're going to speak to. So
Yes.
when I used to speak about my area of expertise that I dove into was agile supply chain in the Army, not lean, because everybody wants lean until you run out of everything.
Yes.
I was trying to redefine it as agile, saying, no, actually, our business, we kind of not allowed to run out of things. It's kind of
That's
how it
right.
works, right? Like,
Mhm.
I just in time doesn't work on a
No.
battlefield, right? I can't look at the tanker and say, I'm sorry, but your tank is now a pillbox because
Yes.
the diesel will be here in 3 hours.
Yes. No.
So try to build agility. But when I'm talking to a certain portion of the military is a great example because it's it's it doesn't have a culture. It's a conglomeration of cultures,
Mhm.
depending on what portion of or what regiment you're in, field you serve in. So when I would walk in the room as the guy who provided beans, bullets, and gas to the Army, and I'm speaking to the Air Force about clean, dry, on spec fuel for their helicopters, that's a different culture, a different
Yep.
organization, a
Yep.
different presentation style,
Yep.
a
Yep.
different joke set, for lack of a better
Oh, oh
thing,
yeah.
right?
No,
Like what's
no.
acceptable, what's not to joke
Oh
about is
yes.
different based
Oh
upon
yeah.
culture.
Oh
So when you
yes.
take the time to know your audience, and this is that preparation thing, and I'm not talking days,
No, 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 no.
I'm talking an hour before
Yep.
you go to meet a group or present in front of
Yes.
them.
Yes.
And the one guy this morning said the thing, he goes, if I'm presenting in front of, you know, a council or shall we say a board of directors, he said, I'm looking at all of their LinkedIn profiles before I get there.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
He said, because he said, yeah, I'll look at their professional qualifications, but I'm looking for the one who snowboards. He
Yes.
said, because I snowboard.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm looking
Yes.
for the one who snowboards. I'm looking
Yes.
for the one who is a budding author because I'm a budding author.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
if I didn't take the hour of preparation before we jumped into this,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that there was a
Yep.
snowboarder in the room. I wouldn't
Yep.
know. And yeah, I find it quite interesting. You know, everybody debates about the strength and the weaknesses of culture in different organizations. I'm like, well, yeah, probably need to take some time to understand the culture
Yes.
before you start passing judgments on the culture,
Yes. Yes.
whether it's
Yes.
in your country, in a corporation, or overseas. Because I saw way too much of that in my previous career, where
Mhm.
people would superimpose their value system
Yes.
on a different culture.
Yes.
And
Yes.
North Americans, and I'm sure you've seen it, we have a habit of a bit of a superiority complex, to be politically correct.
We know better than the rest of the universe. Is that what you're saying?
Well, something about the global north versus the global south that you
Oh,
hear all the
yes.
time. And I'm like, well, then you obviously have never spent time in the global south.
That's right.
Because when you do, you quickly understand, oh, it's not them that have the problem.
No.
They're doing quite fine, actually.
Yes. Yes, they are. You know, it's interesting. Two or three things that came to mind. One is the whole notion of business casual. What is business casual? In past decades, when I was working with various groups, especially military, business casual always had me laugh when they would come in. They would wear jackets without ties, you know, dress shirts without a tie and a jacket and slacks. And I look at them and I go, you know, in certain businesses, that's not business casual. That's actually the way you go to the office.
Yeah.
You may or may not wear a tie, but that's become kind of normative. But business casual means you don't have a jacket. You don't bother with it. Shirt and slacks, fine. All right. You don't have to have cutoffs and t-shirts, please. That's not business casual. The word business is important. However, I always found military people overdressed in a civilian situation. And he used to laugh. And I used to ask him, I used to say, folks, why do you dress this way? He said, well, we actually don't know how to dress in a civilian context. And it used to make me laugh. I used to tell them, okay, take your jackets off, relax. We're going to have a session. It's going to be, maybe you're going to sweat, maybe you're not, but I'm going to either entertain you or you're going to entertain me. And the jacket isn't going to help you. So
No.
take it off. Okay. It was always so funny. And it was almost a universal rule. I don't know what business casual is, so I'm going to come in and dress like I think a civilian should dress or might dress, not even should, might dress in a casual situation. And I respected that because for a variety of reasons. One had said to me that we're embedded in our cultures, and it's a matter of respect to understand that these people are acting within the terms of their culture. Uh, what constitutes casual inside of the military may be some form of fatigues, which is not what they're going to do showing up at a session.
No.
They're not going to dress that way. That's a different issue. That's a work casual, which is a uniform casual. All right, I understood that, but to have people come in dressed in a way that in civilian world or whatever you want to call us was a little overdressed was interesting to see. What is even more interesting is say you're in a country like Jordan, and the swing in degrees was, well, 16 in the morning, which is kind of nice, to say the least, especially from a Canadian point of view, to 47 degrees in the middle of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
And you go, and some of the major people who were sponsoring us, say, the chairman of the board of the Shipping Association, Dr. Dareed, absolutely wonderful little person. I shouldn't say that as if I'm a big person, but this is a man who knows absolutely everybody, dressed to the nines, no matter what the weather was. Okay.
Yep.
The president, who's the hired staff member, if you want, the chief staff member of the association, captain, he's a captain, well, I wouldn't say Navy captain, but a Marine maritime captain. He actually captained ships. He would be dressed in a suit without the tie. So it's almost like a ranking. One had the tie, one didn't have the tie. Okay. On the last day of our session in Amman, I got all dressed up because this was the day we were presenting certificates. So I had the tie, the jacket, the whole bit. And my colleague, he was completely dressed up, tie, so on and so forth. The captain was dressed up. So we were all very formal in a business point of view. Now, part of it was we were giving out P-Log certificates. Okay, fine. So it was a ceremony. It was going to be a celebration. But even more interesting, Dr. Dareed had inveigled the Canadian ambassador to come and hand out the certificates.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh no. This is a man who's connected, absolutely connected. Well, the Canadian ambassador in Jordan is absolutely delightful. He's a fascinating individual. His name is Tariq Ali Khan. How Canadian can we get? A tall, elegant gentleman, maybe in his late 40s, early 50s. Very, very open, very nice, very receptive, very, of course, he comes in with what we call here in Canada, the summer suit, so it's totally different. But his, again, I'm going through the ranking here, his commercial officer, Omar, who's a local, comes in dressed in jeans, not quite a t-shirt, but no suit whatsoever. All right, there was just no way. Our man, maybe in his early 40s, so compared to the rest of us, relatively young. And I thought, okay, okay, he was there escorting the ambassador,
Yeah.
but for him, this is the way I dress. Period. That's
Yep.
it. You know, doesn't matter the place, the occasion, the moment, the event. Doesn't matter. This is how I dress. And interestingly enough, we had an actual meeting with the ambassador the next day for about half hour, 45, what it actually went on to 45 minutes. Again, out of respect for his excellency, the ambassador from Canada to Jordan, we all dressed up, except for all of the commercial officers, because we met a whole bunch of them. Some of them, I looked at them going, did you just come from the football pitch, or like what? Whoa. Yes, it's like 33,000 degrees out there, but you're in an air-conditioned building.
Context here.
Yeah,
Context. Where are you?
Yeah, where are you? Oh, we're meeting Canadians, Canadian business people. Hi, I left my horse out at the ranch.
Yeah.
Good for you.
You want an impression, just maybe not that one.
Yeah. Yes. So it gets us to that issue of say, back to networking. Networking is not necessarily my favorite thing, except that I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I just don't call it networking.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You go in and you deliver a program for 3 days. And what are you doing with? And there are 40 people out there. And so what are you doing? You're networking. Period. Full stop. That's what you're doing. They are there because of you. Therefore, you are networking with them.
Yeah.
And it is your responsibility to actually network.
Do it. Yeah.
When we were in Aqaba, because I delivered a workshop in Aqaba for about 2 or 3 hours, and it was about clustering, and it was about 20 people in the room, a little less formal than in Amman. I had a flip chart, and I had my flip chart, what I call my corporate crayons, so
Yep.
which smell terrible. And so I actually broke it off, and this is very unusual in a culture like Jordan, where I said, okay, I want now you have to feed me, tell me, this is what I think clustering is. What's clustering for you? And it was fascinating. We filled, I think, 5 pages and I just kept writing it and and I say this, that, and the other, and that was networking.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't my speaking to them as I got them to speak to me about what my vision is in terms of positioning Jordan as a neutral center of excellence in the Middle East. And they went, oh, they actually came up with reviewing their own history, where Jordan was at some point and had all the facilities that could cluster and connect to do that very thing. But then there was a change in strategy and everything went by the wayside. I said, well, now there's a time for us to sit down, and I'll come back and we'll do it together to put it all back together again and look at a new strategy, which is based on the old strategy.
Exactly.
You know,
which makes a world of sense when you put I hate the phrase power to the people, because it means so many different things to different.
Yeah. Okay,
but,
please.
But when you're
now.
and if I know, but when you're facilitating a session,
yes,
and you're trying to get a general concept across,
yes,
I find it far more impactful if I let the audience draw the roadmap.
Yes.
I'm the facilitator, not the instructor.
Yes,
Those are two distinctly different roles when
exactly.
you're in a group. So if I'm giving a lecture on something that really doesn't have any discussion points, right? Like think of biology. We can't debate whether the skeletal system is the skeletal system or not. It is. So it is a lecture. Sit
Mhm.
back. I'm on send. You're on receive. Be quiet. Here it is, type of thing.
Yeah,
But when we're talking about the social sciences and culture and
yeah,
organizational, and when you when you meant clustering, it got me back to thinking not of a Dirty Harry movie, but more of the UN's idea of clustering to try to deconflict the thousands of actors that show up in the humanitarian space.
yeah.
Because in the humanitarian space and emergency response, nobody's in charge.
Mhm.
Like nobody is in charge. The UN doesn't take command and control of what's going
Oh,
on.
yeah,
The World Food Program is the big runs logistics for the UN. They're
yes,
also move the food.
yes.
So the logistics culture cluster that they started, and this was really got to fruition after the 2004 Indonesian tsunami and earthquake, was getting the parties together. I just want to get all the logisticians under a tent.
Yeah,
That's all I'm trying to do.
yeah.
Right. I don't have a position to tell them what to do, but I'd really love
Mhm.
to have everybody together who's executing some form of logistics function in support of this greater purpose so that we can figure out you're going where, I'm going where, what are you doing, what are you bringing to the table, and before you know it, the solution lies in the room with the people who are already there.
Exactly.
You don't need an externally imposed answer
Yeah,
to a problem. It's already there. And a lot of
right.
like, and I'm sure you saw this when you bring people together that are in the industry, but they often never do this. You know, I'm company A, you're company B, we go back and forth,
Yep,
but do we really ever sit around in a cluster format and
yep,
and think about the bigger picture, think about what we're all trying to
yep,
do, how
yep.
we interact, what problems we're trying to solve. And this actually came out of a total aside talking with electricians.
Ooh,
And the reason is when you're a small electrical company in a reasonably small area, there's not many players. So you're trying to get as many accounts as you can and keep as many accounts as you can. We brought them together to say there's enough business here for everybody. You'll actually do better if you consider yourself three companies in a pool of clients
oh,
and not three companies in a competition for
yes,
clients.
yes, yes.
Because economics aside, you know, businesses will enter while there's economic profit and then they stop entering, basic rules of economics. But when you're 10 logistics companies working in a space and
Mhm,
you view it as I'm in competition with everybody else,
mhm,
I'm a firm believer there is a huge value in changing that orientation
mhm.
towards we are 10 companies providing complementary services
Yes.
to a larger industry in support of whatever the mission may be. And when you do that, companies realize that, you know, I have a certain distribution network, you have a distribution network. Together, we can support the entire system. In competition, we're fighting for the same clients.
It's core to how I like to consider supply chain logistics at any level, global, local, individual, or corporate. And that is recognizing that supply chain logistics, however you define it, whether you call it logistics on the one hand, supply chain on the other, and you split it up into little tiny pieces, I really don't care. To me, it's an ecosystem. All right. One part needs the other. Uh, you cannot do anything without the total picture. You need the business ecosystem. And one of the things about an ecosystem, I don't care whether you call it plants in a jungle or whatever, an ecosystem is about codependency. You have to cooperate.
Yeah.
right? The roots of one need the roots of the other.
Yeah.
Okay. And this whole notion of competition, which is valid. There's no reason, maybe I should rephrase that. It's valuable because you want to succeed. However, recognizing that your success is actually co-created in relationship to everybody else, including people you identify as your competition,
Yep.
then you realize that your world is bigger than, and your opportunities are bigger than just what happens inside the four walls over against what happens in someone else's, inside someone else's four walls. Now, folks, by the way, in the Middle East, this has got to be the biggest struggle because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
everybody
I know.
is in
Yeah.
competition. They
Yeah.
all want to say, I can't work with him or
Yeah.
that one or this one. Oh, and then if you get into cultural differences, and I won't even begin to define those, then you start this whole other rationale, which is irrational, around why I won't work with other people. and so and so I understand. Okay, let me rephrase that. I have the desire to talk in terms of and to work with people from a cluster strategy point of view, focusing on ecosystems and the codependency, co-creation, whatever term you want. The fact that we are communities working together, even as we work against each other from a competitive point of view, yet there's a need for all the functioning parts. Otherwise, the machine just stops. All right. Now, getting people to recognize that requires them to rise above their specific needs, look outside the four walls, as I call it, and say, I need, and then I need, and this is a value, and that's a value. And maybe if we could negotiate some kind of deal, we might all succeed within the context of what we can do.
Yep.
But it's one of those, okay, folks, I know where I am. This is the Middle East. This is not going to happen overnight. But if we stop just thinking in terms of this company, this logistics company, and that logistics company, and that logistics company, and start looking at, say, value creation, economic development. These are big ticket items. This is not me getting my 30 drachma or whatever it is. That's not drachma, sorry. In Jordan, I just crossed a line there.
I'm not saying a word.
You don't have to. I just said it. We look at that and know that yes, there's a recognition that there's something bigger that we can do. We also look at the I'll call them more than constraints, the blockages and the blockades around it. Give you an example. One of the things that Jordan has becoming is a gateway to moving goods for refugees. All right, food in particular. The struggle is rather interesting if you leave it at that terrible word. And going through the port of Aqaba is not possible. Although from the hotel that I was staying in Aqaba, across the Gulf of Aqaba is Eilat. That's the Israeli port. Mm. And down the coast is the Saudi port. You go, they don't shoot each other. They actually, on occasion, interact from a business point of view. It's about business. This is what I keep telling people. Whatever the geopolitical issue is, it's all about business. People need to feed themselves and their families, and they need to make money, and so on and so forth. So one of the items or issues that the ambassador, the Canadian ambassador, identified is that one of the routes into Gaza is through the Allenby Gate. The Allenby Gate is outside of Amman, north, whatever, and it's the crossover. This is where stuff moves on by truck. There are no major railways in Amman, so it's moving by truck across the border. And there's the Jordanian side, and then there's the Israeli side. The Jordanian side, there's a big holdup. And the issue is not the Israeli side. The Israeli side is there are all kinds of truckers waiting to move stuff because they know they're going to get paid. This is about money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not politics, it's money.
Oh, give me a break. I don't care. I'll move this stuff into Gaza, and yes, I might get attacked by Israelis of the super right side, right wing, and all that. Yeah, fine, but it's about money, and the risk is worth it. The stoppage, the holdback, is the security group on the Jordanian side. Yeah. And I was stunned. I looked at him and I said, "Could you please explain? I don't understand." Well, one of the problems in Jordan that people have recognized, even internally, is that there's too much of a bureaucracy. There are too many people with too many fingers inside of too few pots who have to make the decision in order to justify doing anything. So Jordan is rife with multiple layers of decision makers. And we're not talking the royal family. This is totally different.
No.
Part of it. This is totally different. This is
embedded bureaucracy.
This is an embedded bureaucracy that's been around for a long time. So there are two security groups at the border. Well, one is the national security, and the other is the military. Mm-hmm. And they don't like each other. And so internally, it's about who is going to make the final decision that is going to open the gate in order to get the stuff to cross the border. And everything's being held in the back.
Yep.
So-called back room. And the ambassador said, "Listen, we should probably do a training program for the security people here in Jordan." I said, "Okay, when I come back, but not right now."
Yeah.
Not right now. I've got to go home. But it's fascinating when you think about this. And my colleague who was with me, who is Jordanian Canadian, he said, that is a traditional problem here in the Middle East. Yeah. And you and I talked about that, in Afghan, in the Afghani situation, Afghanistan. Who actually moved the stuff? Well, the people who are going to make the money. And it's the local driver.
By far, yeah. Yeah.
And don't give me Taliban versus the rest of the universe, or whoever is in charge, or whichever political, military, quasi-military, gun-toting group is. How do I get the goods? How much are you going to pay me? Is the issue. Full stop.
And how much of my stuff would arrive? So
exactly.
Traditionally in Afghanistan, they are part of the Silk Road. And so their culture is embedded in the transportation of goods.
Yes.
And so it is something that they've done for generations.
Yes.
And it's done on the negotiation tool. And it's not, North Americans roll in there with formal contracts.
Yes.
That doesn't go very far in the culture.
No.
I would ship 40,000 liters of diesel to receive 30.
Yeah.
We in the West call that thievery. In their culture, it's how they do business.
That's the cost of doing business.
It's part of the cost of goods sold. It's
exactly.
Right? But we view it as, and this was part of NATO not understanding culture, is we're then putting 14 different seals on every bolt on a 40,000 liter trailer to try to get our diesel from one end to the other. And the brilliance of the Afghans, I will never underestimate. Every seal arrived intact, and there's 10,000 liters missing. And there were no holes in the vehicle. Like, to this day, some of us still don't understand how they did it, but we would view it in the frame of here is a culture stealing from us,
Mhm.
because that's our ignorance
Yep.
of the culture that we're in. And the fact that you shipped 40 boxes of fruit to get 30 to the other end,
Exactly.
because we view compensation as money.
No. No.
They view compensation as part of the goods under transport.
That's right. That's right.
So the 5,000 liters of fuel siphoned off at location A was actually the payment, where we would
Exactly.
consider the remuneration for the contract to be a fund swift transfer through
Yep.
a banking system.
Yes. Yes.
Again, it's cultural ignorance
That's right.
and superimposing that Western value. It's like when you meet with the people in organizations like that, you ask, who's your advocacy group? And when you see the mature industries, especially you can see that here in Canada, the mature industries have strong advocacy groups
Yes.
that lobby on their behalf, that are well supported by their industry, right?
Yep.
You know, the oil and gas, the chemical industry in Canada, because that's far less political to talk about. The chemical industry has a robust and well-funded lobby advocacy group for government policy
Yes.
interventions.
Of course.
That advocacy group is funded by everybody in the business.
Yep.
It is not about crushing company A or company B.
Nope.
They all understand that they need everybody in that
Yes.
ecosystem to be
Yes.
successful, for the greater ecosystem to be successful.
Yes.
And I love sitting down with organizations that haven't made that
Yes.
mind. I don't call them ignorant. It's just a mind map. It's a different lens.
Exactly.
And you realize that all of these shipping companies in Jordan can be more successful by creating that relationship, but the
Yep.
cultural barriers are hard. I mean, let's jump into local politics in Canada right now. People in Canada are making a whole bunch of decisions about this foreign interference without understanding the roles of the different institutions that are involved.
Mm. Mm.
Like, no, you don't name somebody publicly in Canada until a charge has been laid. That's how the law works.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody's charged with a crime under the criminal code, their name is made public, because we want that in an open society.
Mm-hmm.
When you're suspected of a crime, we don't want your
No.
name released, because that's a protection you and I enjoy,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
as soon as you demand it of one class,
Oh,
buddy, here it comes for everybody.
exactly.
Absolutely everybody, until a charge is laid. And it's ignorance is I don't want to call it a disease of the internet, to be honest, but it is
Oh, it is.
part of what was it? A good friend of mine coined this phrase. He said, we used to be okay because the village idiots were on their own.
Yeah.
The problem we did with the internet is we put them all together.
Oh, that is perfect. That is so pleased. That's a topic for another session, because
We'll
I
kick
could
that
go
down
on
the road.
forever on that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the level of ignorance that has been perpetrated by the dumbing down of everything that's been perpetrated by social media is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, one of the series, this is definitely an aside, on my Instagram, I enjoy postings of people reading poetry. And it's just beautiful. But what they do is they'll have an actor or an actress, reading the poetry that's written by somebody. Like, one of my favorite poets is Emily Dickinson, and so I was listening to somebody read one of my favorite poems from my favorite poet the other day. But then they do the script, the subscript, the subtitles, the whatever. So in case you can't understand the actor, you can read it. And I kept looking at it saying, wrong word, Wrong word, misspelled, you're an idiot. By the time it was finished, I went, stop reading, because the AI or whoever is typing in that stuff is a moron, absolute idiot, does not know the poem, does not know how to spell, does not know the words. So, and you know, like the difference between sore and sore.
Yep.
Uh, they don't mean the same thing, but they sound, this is the problem with English. They sound exactly alike.
Yep.
All right. And the tonal differences are minimum. And so what is the first thing that appears? The wrong sore. You just go, you know, how hurt was that bird when it was soaring somewhere? You
Yeah.
know, you just go, you ruined the freaking poem, damn you, you stupid machine. And
And
then you
now
get
I'm
it.
looking at the poetry. I'm not paying attention to the
No,
words. I'm looking for mistakes now. So the whole
exactly.
purpose of listening to it has been
Yes,
defeated.
yes, yes. One of the fun parts is, and it's not fun because we all go through this, is the autocorrect. And I'm doing all kinds of stuff, and I have to go back and reread absolutely everything, because what gets into the message is not what I spelled. It's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
who are you to change the word as I'm typing it and just filling it in? Like,
Yeah.
what?
Well, it's a Canadian English. Like the word en route,
Oh,
ENROUTE, is a word in
thank you.
Canadian English,
Yes,
but there's not a darn, and I'll be politically correct, darn autocorrect in this world that doesn't keep changing it.
it does. It does. I've given up. I now I actually use a phrase to do en route, because I decide that's it. I can't handle this change anymore. But you know, even more interesting is your story about the, you know, the I'm going to use the Jordanian word petrol crossing the border. And there's a reason why I'm using the word petrol. What I would love to have done was to sit down with the drivers and the company that moved this, and then the disappearing of X amount, with all the seals and no punctures and everything, just the way you described it. I would just like to sit down and say, sotto voce, you know,
Yeah,
tell me how you did it.
I know. I'm not
Just like,
after you. I'm not going to get you. I
no,
just
but
want to
I want
know.
to know
Wow.
how you did
Your
it.
ingenuity is incredible.
Oh, to me, that's brilliance,
Oh, yeah.
absolute brilliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and part of it also, you know, one of the things, I've said this in public and I'll say it again in public. Um, I think one of the greatest, most successful, sadly, global supply chains with logistics to go with it is contraband drugs.
Oh, ingenuity everywhere.
How do you move millions of tons of that stuff into a major country like the United States, or partially into Canada or parts of Europe, under the radar to the point where nobody detects you? I
Yep.
don't care what television show, cop show says, oh, we got them, the biggest bust in. And you go, yeah, well, what about all the other bigger busts that you missed? Because obviously we've got a national social problem with this stuff, uh, yet it's still being fed.
It's the conversation I had with the Afghan poppy farmer.
Ah.
And almost literally translated, it's not our worry. You're the one with the addiction problem.
Exactly.
We're just farming.
We're farmers.
Now, don't get me wrong, 3/4 of them are as high as a kite all day long by
Yes.
cutting the
Yeah.
bulb and whatever. But
Yeah.
the point, what his point was, he's just a farmer. There's a
Yeah.
product in demand. He gets, at the time, it was anywhere from 12 to 15 times per acre price if he planted poppy instead of grain.
Well,
So economics, feed your family,
yeah.
basic 101.
Oh,
This
yeah.
man was not evil. He
No.
was simply trying to make the best economic game and
Yeah.
feed his family.
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
so, he harvested, X number of months out of the year, and the rest of the time he had nothing to do. So sure, when some guys came along and said, I got some other stuff I'd like you to do over here. Here's some money. Of course he picks up his shovel
Of
and
course it. Sure
goes,
does.
does something else. Right. But I
Sure.
mean, it's that culture imposition that I find hilarious, where
Yes.
everybody says, like, we have this war on drugs.
Mhm.
Well, guess what happened in Canada when you legalize weed? Pretty much nothing.
That's right.
The 4 million Canadians, or 4 or 5 million Canadians that smoke weed off the motorcycle gangs, now
Mhm.
smoke weed for the most part off of the legal system.
That's right.
And now you make a little tax about it. We didn't see this massive increase in crashes
No.
and death on the roads,
No.
absenteeism,
No. No.
crash. I mean, we're crashing in productivity in this country, the worst in the G7, but that's for a whole different set of
No. Yeah, that's different.
questions altogether. Now, I'm not talking about hard drugs or anything, but I'm just saying, like, this American idea of we're in this steadfast to the grave fight against drugs,
Mm.
and it's our job to go to Colombia and burn the farms.
Yeah.
Why don't you just, it's a supply and demand curve. Why don't you just erase demand? And then they can build all the farms they want,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody in your country is buying it anymore. Right? Because it's always got to be, external. I need to solve my problem by going to fix somebody else.
Yes.
It's the
Yes.
other culture that's got it
Yeah.
wrong,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
go
Yeah. There you go.
get them to
Yeah.
do it right.
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 There's a superior, we know better, we're more righteous, we're the ones who need to be in charge, and therefore you're just low life, dirt diggers.
And I
uh,
learned from a really smart individual to use the phrase that I now use is, this is what worked for me. This is what's worked for organizations that I've had the pleasure of working with before.
mhm,
Maybe it might work for you.
mhm.
Instead of me standing up in front of the room, looking at professionals that have been doing this activity for a certain way and saying, hi, I'm here from Canada. I'm about to show you the best way to do your job.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. What a
Yes.
faster way to turn off the light on your future activity than something like that.
Yes, yes. It gets me back to what I kept emphasizing when I was in Jordan this past 2 or 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And that is, I said, folks, we have to get back to our roots here in Jordan.
Yeah.
And they looked at me and said, you are, the DNA of your culture is Nabatean. They look at me and said, it's part of the Silk Road. You are part of the major trading nations or regions. Let's call it a region, because nationalism is a different, or national identity is a different thing. You are at core a bunch of traders. And
Yeah.
I don't mean that in the T word, I mean the D word.
Yeah.
This is what was the economy at the time, and it got the Romans to make sure they came in here, and it got the Seleucids to come in, and you have a whole history of so-called conquest that allowed trade to continue. Okay, and your Nabatean culture, and I thought Nabatean culture went all the way back even to the earliest. No, it's actually somewhere in between the late BC and the early AD. So it's actually more recent than some of the other. But it's part of the international trade routes that had been in existence since the Bronze Age,
Yeah.
when we believed people were too stupid and therefore lived in caves and couldn't communicate and didn't have language and were just beneath us because they were primitive. That wonderful word, primitive. Screw that. There's
I
no
know.
such thing as primitive.
I know.
I mean, I was in the city of Jerash. Jerash is one of the 10 cities that Rome connected in order to create an economic zone. Okay, the Decapolis. We're not talking about anything other than an economic zone.
Yep.
Um, it's not a great art center and all that, but it's stunning. And I'm always amazed at architecture from a time that existed before hydraulics. I, you just, I said,
Fascinating.
who the hell were these people that built this thing? And you're fascinated by it. They have a triumphal arch at the beginning of the entrance to the city that was built in honor of Hadrian, the Emperor Hadrian, from visiting. That's it. It's
Yep.
just this, and you look at it, you go, excuse me, we can't get the subways to run here. And here are people who did not have hydraulics, did not have cranes. Well, they probably did, but not mechanized machinery that
Yep.
we're used to. And they built that, right? And you go, wow, it's fascinating. The amphitheater in downtown Amman, which is one of the other Decapolis cities. By the way, Amman's original name in Greco-Roman times was Philadelphia. That's actually what it was called.
That's wild.
Isn't it? And so you go into the amphitheater, which could seat 6,000 people at any given time. And it still has the best acoustics that I have ever heard anywhere. And they do concerts there. And you could do a play there. And the people all the way at the top can hear what's being said on the
Yep.
stage. What have we lost over time? And what are we proud of that is superior to what people have done before?
And my answer to that is time.
Yes.
It's and I equate it to how many families out there right now are talking about building generational wealth.
Yes.
They don't look like
Oh.
I'm interested, and I've had this conversation with my my son, who's 25 and a far more intelligent investor than I am. I said to him, I said, "Are you interested in making your great grandchildren wealthy, knowing that you will see no value from that? These are humans you will never meet, likely, but they will benefit from the actions you take today."
Yeah.
We don't think like that as a culture anymore. Like, we don't build things so that the next 10 generations can enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
We want to build and have things so we can enjoy them.
Oh, yes.
Like
Yeah.
the idea of building the Canadian Railway and linking this wasn't going to happen this year. Wasn't going to happen next year.
Nope.
It wasn't
Nope.
going to even happen over the next 5 years.
Nope.
We've lost the visionary idea
Exactly.
of building time-lasting systems.
Yes.
Everything we do nowadays is for today. So we wouldn't think of building an Acropolis.
Nope.
Just or the modern equivalent
No.
of that
Nope.
on a time scale. We wouldn't think of commencing a building project that will take 20 years to complete.
Right.
Like, we don't think like that.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's even more interesting, if we were to try to put our heads into the heads of the people who were designing and planning this, they weren't necessarily thinking of 20 generations from now who are going to appreciate this. No, they were doing it because it's part of who they are. It's part of their approach to culture and identity. And those columns that are part of the forum in this town, this backwards town in the middle of nowhere, all right, I'll call it a city, in the middle of nowhere, needs to have that, period. And how long is it going to take to build? Well, I hate to say it, but Euclidean geography, the use of pulleys, and having an engineer's perspective on this, plus locating material supply, as well as transport, getting the stuff there. I mean, this you factor in. You don't have uh, a pyramid, built in a day. It just doesn't happen. I'm looking at the construction project across the street. That's going to be finished probably by at least 80%, maybe 75% by the end of the summer. That's unheard of. I mean, you don't build Notre Dame Cathedral. It takes several decades, and it's going to take several decades, and people are going to die in the process because the people who are the stonemasons are not going to survive to the end.
No, and the architect won't see
No,
the end, their vision in person,
no,
but they
no.
still do the work.
Well, yeah. Well, and again, to put our heads into the heads of the people who do this, what I would consider up to a point, and most of us in our culture today would consider ridiculous. I would consider somewhat silly, is and that's I'm being facetious because I'm not really considering it silly. Is what were the driving values that got people to be dedicated to do something like this, right? What are basically what you and I are talking about is what drives us as our values.
Yeah.
Our values today, especially when we're talking in terms of a culture driven by this kind of stuff, it's instantaneous.
Yep.
Right? And I'm not going to start yelling at young people. You don't know how to read, you don't know how to write, you don't know how to tell time and all that. Well, good for you. You probably can do things better than I can. You could certainly do it faster than I can. But are you bringing any depth to your experience of what it is you're doing? What are you actually learning?
Yep.
And that's the part that bothers me is where are you going with this?
Yep.
Yeah, it's future oriented, but we're not future oriented anymore. We're instantaneous and it's all now. There it is. I want it, I have it, there it is. And by the way, I love it because I can do it, if you, as you and I are talking, you start asking me a question, I can Google it on the other screen and have an answer that makes me look really smart. And,
And we're all making the assumption that the Google answer you get is going to be accurate.
well, let me put it to you this way, in a conversation like this, unless you are damn smarter than I am, and I make it and I present it in such a way that, oh, please, I played that game forever.
I
I
know.
present it in such a way that I sound like an expert without referring to the fact that I'm reading it off of Wikipedia. Um, you just go, okay, wow, you must be damn smart. Yeah, I can play smoke and mirrors too.
Oh, I can tell you the best smoke and mirrors. Last night I was my goddaughter's in grade 11, and she has wonderful young lady has had her epiphany and realizes that school marks matter. So it's been like a literal turn.
Hmm.
Gone from I don't care, I'm a bad girl kind of attitude, blah blah blah, I'm cool, to actually no, there's a world out there that if I want to be successful, I
Yep.
kind of have to learn to do these things.
Yeah, yeah.
So she switched it all around. She got a really bad mark on an English assignment, so she sent it to me. And so I'm trying to break down a very simple way of how to organize your thoughts, how to present it, the kind of thing, basic framework that'll get you the 75%. The other 25% is going to be the quality of your persuasion. I had to go back and Google what are the three parts of a thesis. statement. And I say this publicly
Oh
because
yeah.
I
Oh
have no
no.
problem saying it. You know,
Oh
I got multiple degrees, I got a PhD, and here I am. I can't remember the three parts
no.
of a basic thesis statement.
And,
So
and part of the reason why I'm laughing is I have two PhDs.
yep.
As soon as you said that, I said, I haven't a friggin' clue
Nope.
what they are.
Nope. And then I'm like, and where should the thesis statement go in the opening
Exactly.
paragraph? Like, but it was really interesting because I had to go back, and it was funny because it's stored back in the ether somewhere in your brain.
Yeah,
Because once
yeah.
you start reading it, you're like, of course that's
Oh,
the
of
answer.
course.
Of
Yes.
course that's the answer.
Yes,
But
of
I
course.
couldn't
Yeah.
remember for the life of me
No.
how to structure it, a basic, that kind of thing. And so then I pulled out the documents that I'm using for my students in graduate education as to how to form an argument. And so I tried to use that and put it all together. And I sent her a whole long out thing. I said, if you're really interested, here's the thing that if you follow the structure, you'll get 75. The quality of your persuasion will get you the rest of the way, right?
Mhm.
It's the idea of just because you say something is so doesn't mean it's true.
That's right.
That's the hardest breakthrough that I'm having with this
Yes.
generation right now.
Yes. Yes.
Just because you say something is
Right.
true does not make it true. It simply means that you believe it to be true.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean anybody else has to believe it to be true.
That's right.
And it's saying we were always taught in different methodologies that there's a claim, evidence, persuasion model that we use in writing.
Mm-hmm.
That is about doing that. It's about, for example, and I used this where I said, listen, think about all the reasons somebody can disagree with you. You're going to make a claim. Think about all the reasons why they disagree with you. Write them down. Defeat those in your persuasion argument paragraph so that at the end of your short paragraph, the only conclusion that the reader can come to is that your claim that you made in sentence one is in fact logical and likely correct.
Yes.
You're not going to persuasion change embedded cultural ideas, etc. But on a persuasive element,
yes.
you do that.
Yeah.
But and it gives me to this other point that I, a bit of a side, I've refound my, it's a bad word, but refound my love of rekindled my love of writing. So I have a podcast. I record podcast episodes. I do videos. I do a whole bunch of stuff on social media to try to generate interest in my business. I've redesigned how I do work now. Every day starts with writing. Every day. So it's even the first thing on my calendar every day is a half-hour appointment that says every day starts with writing. So if I have a podcast episode that I'm going to do today, I'm going to write a blog. And as I write the blog, the initial idea probably changes 3 or 4 times.
Oh, yes.
I'll go back, I'll polish it, whatever.
Yep.
But it is that writing that I do in that creative space that transforms to the reels that I put on social media, that transforms to the structure of the podcast.
Yep.
And I find when I've been doing that of late, the capture level or the engagement level goes up when you take the time. And this is the counter idea to the immediacy of social media, of people saying, well, I need to make a comment right now because I need to be relevant. So I need to jump in right now. Vice our generation that would ponder, think, and consider and formulate. Whereas the generation now is, it's like having a machine gun. It's just belt fed in for just firing stuff everywhere to see what'll hit. And I've just found it really interesting is getting back to the art of writing and the enjoyment of kind of immersing yourself in your thought process to come together. And I find it much more persuasive. And it makes the day go far easier than trying to struggle. Oh, well, what am I going to talk about today?
Yeah. Interesting as a somewhat of a public persona, um, who delivers, 80 to 90-minute sessions on a regular basis. One of the things that I do is, at the starting point, I think of my audience, and I think of, well, not just that. I think of my audience in terms of how do I want them to think differently from what they ordinarily every day do.
Yeah.
So I'm now doing a stretch. And the Institute is built on this stretch notion. We're actually quite, I don't know about famous, but we're known for this. I've always said never talk down to somebody, ever. It's a major disrespectful approach. You do not disrespect people by considering them stupid. They are not stupid. I don't care whether they're frontline people. I don't care whether I don't care. I don't care who they are. I don't care if they've got tattoos and they've got, whatever. I don't care. That's not the point. The point is you take a position and you never talk down. Now, you don't take a position that is so outrageous that no one's going to understand what you're saying anyway.
Yeah.
You don't become Noam Chomsky, whom I used to try to read and would go, okay. And by the way, I read Heidegger much more easily in both German and English than I could Chomsky, because I keep asking myself, what's he trying to say? Um, I can't relate to it.
Yeah.
So I try to think about what people can relate to, but never talk down to them. That's principle number one. Principle number two is what do I find interesting? I know this sounds like ego 103, 1010, 110. Well, there's no such thing as 110. Sorry, 110. And so if I'm not interested in what I'm about to say, then why would I even say it? Because then I become a boring pedant. I have to find it interesting for me so that I can make it not entertaining, but challenging for somebody else. Again, if you don't talk down to people, but you try to get them to think outside of what their comfort zone is, and that's intentional. I want you to get out of your comfort zone. Your assumptions, that's what we kept talking about in Jordan. I want to take your assumptions and I want you to question them.
Yeah.
Because if you don't question your assumptions, then you're caught with them and you never get out of that trench. And so that kind of a challenge I find invigorating on the one hand, and to tautologize the whole thing, to say a challenge that's challenging, because you never know if you go over somebody's head or you're going around them or you're upsetting them. The third thing I always do is I'm never satisfied with the final product, ever. Okay, I will go and rewrite the whole damn thing, not the night before I deliver, but I will review and then I will review and then I will review, and I'll start making differences and I'll start making slight changes. I may not change the whole thing, but I'll make changes in emphasis.
Yeah.
And but one of the other things I learned is when I should be doing this. So I came back from Jordan. My flight was on Wednesday morning in Jordan at 2:30 in the morning. Right. There are reasons for that, most of them religious. You want to get the plane off the ground before first prayer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Oh, yeah.
And oh no, oh yes. And we're not going to talk about the logistics of people trying to get onto the plane. That's a whole other, using a Yiddish term, that's a whole other schmozzle, that these people haven't a clue how to move people onto a plane. But let me not dwell on that. So there it is, on Wednesday morning. Tuesday, spent the whole day trying not to sleep, but taking occasional, let's lie down for a while. Monday night, not sleeping at all. The night before I actually have to travel, I usually get this super intense. So I have not slept for close to 2 days. And I'm getting on a plane that's going to be like 100 hours of flying. All right. And I don't sleep on flights. Never. I don't give a damn how short. I don't care how long. I don't care if it's my longest flight was 36 hours to Sydney, Australia. Did not sleep a wink during the entire time. Right, so that's me. So now I have not slept. I arrive in Toronto. I get through customs, which is like 30 seconds. I get home by 11:30 on Wednesday morning, Wednesday morning. And I go to bed. And I go to bed for almost 24 hours. Get up yesterday, still feeling a little wonky, and I decide, oh, let's look at the PowerPoint presentations that I am going to use next week for this 5-day session that I'm
Oh, yeah, because it's the perfect time.
Of course.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
started. I was confused by what I was
had
trying
wrote.
to say. And I kept saying, what are you doing? You can't say that. And I started criticizing. It's like the night before the essay is due, you decide to write a totally new essay. And that's when I said, idiot, stop. Go do something else. I don't care what you do. Go for a walk, watch TV, do something else. Do not touch that stuff.
No, you don't.
Because your head is not there. And
Right.
you are going to do things to that stuff that then is going to be totally foreign when you stand up and talk.
Because when you turn that on Monday morning or Tuesday afternoon, that lecture, you're going to look at it.
Go, who the hell who the hell wrote that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I have no idea. And
I don't know what I'm trying to say, but here it is.
I always try to have all of my presentation materials done no less than 7 days before they're delivered.
Yes.
And I package it.
Yes.
I'm done. Like it's a personal rule.
Oh, no.
Because what I've learned to do, and it's been reasonably successful so far, is I don't change the PowerPoint. I make anecdotal notes.
Yes.
And not in the notes portion of the PowerPoint, because I can never seem to find those damn things.
I can never find them anyway.
Right? Exactly. Right? And you put weird notes in there, and then you send somebody the PowerPoint and realize you sent them your chicken scratch notes, right?
Yes.
And that's not what you want to send.
No.
So I'm a technology guy. I use the Apple Notes function, but what I do is I write the anecdotal notes, because when I'm focused on creating a piece of content, I know the content is well created. Then when different ideas come up, they become anecdotal examples. They become supportive and assisted elements for discussion points.
Yes.
But I stay the heck away from the structural elements, the organizational standard, and what is in the PowerPoint. I'm not a huge PowerPoint guy. I use PowerPoint to help me, not you as my audience.
Yes.
It is to make sure that I remember to hit these 3 to 4 points.
Exactly.
It's not because I want you to read the PowerPoint.
No.
I don't want it's the antithesis. To me, it's the antithesis of learning. If I'm going to just read out the PowerPoints out loud, what's the point of me being there? You could have stayed home and sent it to
I
you.
agree.
Right. So it's about, I use it to keep me, to make sure I say the big muscle movements, and I try to use those anecdotal ideas that I write down for the discussion points. Because because again, it's about, where does the conversation go when you're in a different organizational group, a different culture?
Exactly.
When I was giving a presentation on distribution methodologies in a combat zone to different audiences, they're going to come up, different areas of what I say are areas that are going to trigger them and that they're very much interested in.
Yes.
It may not be what I thought they would be.
Yes.
Right. So I'm not in a position to say I'm going to change the presentation because I think this is what they're really interested in.
No.
It's like I'm going to give the presentation with anecdotal examples that
Yes.
are associated with my audience,
Yes.
but I'm really going to let the audience take us where we're going to go, because somebody brings up little things like, how do you get climate controlled stuff across a desert?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, carefully. But joking aside,
Of course.
they
Here's how. Yeah.
the presentation did not go into the finite details of maintaining a cold chain in a plus 47-degree environment with limited access to power.
Yeah. Yeah.
It said the cold chain was part of the supply chain. They picked up on it. They wanted to extrapolate it. We went down that road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what if I had turned around before and presupposed that they'd be interested in that,
Mm-hmm.
done 4 extra slides on that at the end to adjust it,
Mm-hmm.
only to find out they couldn't care less.
No,
Wasn't their
not at all.
interest.
Not at all. Not at
So
all.
I kind of like that, because I never am certain, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing. You're never certain where your conversation, your audience is
Exactly.
going to take it.
Exactly. Exactly. What I find, and I'm going to spend 2 days reviewing the entire series that I'm going to give next week, and there's a reason for it, not to make any changes, but to highlight things I really want to talk about. Not that they all have copies of this stuff. All right, I read it whenever you feel like it. If you think it's interesting or important or significant for you, fine, good for you. What's more important is anecdotal stories that I bring through my experience, that I want you to tell me your experience that either counters it or is similar to, or whatever. I really don't care, but I want a conversation around stories that are based on experience. This, I always say this to people at the very beginning. These PowerPoints are like a springboard. You know, either you're going to jump into discussion, or we're going to jump into storytelling, or we're going to get stuck with all the words here. My position is not words and getting stuck with the words. I don't want to do that. You know, as academics, and thinking again of your godchild, you know, there's that difference between proof text and anecdotal support. A proof text is, show me where you support this idea based on someone else's either comparable or counter idea. You're either arguing against or you're arguing for what somebody else said. So it's that, you know, PhD thing with 10,000, you know, notes, you know, footnotes, and so this is what this person, proving that you know what you're talking about. Proof text always drove me crazy because I was so bored with that stuff. When I read someone's article in a, you know, scientific or academic journal, and I get through that first section, especially in social sciences, where they're going to do a lit review, I'm already to sleep. Like, I don't care. I want to know what your position is. I want to know what your insights are. I want to learn from you. And I'm not here to validate anything. I just want insights. So, but I always think that the reason why I'm going to go through all this stuff is I have learned in PowerPoint how to highlight things. You know, like, you know, you go, you put a box around something, you remove all of the, you know, the color of the box, and then you oh, look at that. That's what I want to talk about, is what appears in the animation for the, you know, the box that appears around the 5 or 6 words I want to talk about. So I think we're about to come to an end here. It's 11:30ish. You have things, I have things, but I want to end off with one last story coming out of Jordan. when I'm in a foreign country, I never drive. I always have people help me or drive for me, and if I need to, it's going to be a taxi or whatever. And so we were driving all over the place. You go up to Jerash, or you go over this way, you go over that way, and and you're driving all over the place. And I kept looking, saying, "That's interesting. I wonder who that is. I wonder who that is." And it took me 3 days to figure this out. That's how dense I can be. The petrol stations are called Joe Petrol. I said, "Who the hell is Joe?" It took me 2 to 3 days to realize that J-O is a shortened version of Jordan or
Yeah.
Jordanian.
Yeah.
And I said this to my colleagues, and they looked at me as if to say, "Are you that dense?" I said, "Well, to me, it's advertising. Joe Petrol owns all these stations." And they said, "No, that's the national company, Jordanian Petrol." Okay, thank you. Now, if you can laugh at yourself for being that dense at that level, then I think you've arrived.
You have to. And one last comment on PowerPoint. My secret is I use the rule of threes. There's only 3 points to everything, and the one that really matters is always number 3.
Yes,
And that's what I use. Like, so I don't have any cues to the room of what's most important. The cue is whatever I've written third. I know that's the one that I want to emphasize. The other two place the frame that suits the last part going. But if you can't make fun of yourself, and prime example is when I was upside down after the rapids, I once again was responsible on my last canoe trip for tipping the canoe because I made an error in judgment. And you stand there and you take the picture like this with a big smile on your face.
Of course you do.
Soaking wet. You're like, here I am.
Here I am. Here's
I've been
proof.
doing this for 40 years and I can still successfully turn a canoe upside down in a set of rapids.
And there you go, and there I am pointing out Joe Petrol and asking, who's Joe?
Like Petro Canada, what's that about?
Yeah. Okay, that's too difficult. Joe Petrol. All right. As always, wonderful. I wish you a great weekend. And
all right.
We'll talk maybe next week sometime.